Well, believe it or not, it's been almost 18 months since I did my review of the little Suzuki VStrom 250 SX. I can't believe it's been 18 months, but it has. In this long-term review, it's done almost 10,000, or actually a little over maybe 10,000 kilometres now. That's a little over about 6,000 mile. I'll put it up on the screen so you've got it exact. I'm going to cover my likes, my dislikes. I'm also going to address questions that I've had either in the comments section or via email in regards to the little 250. I'm Steve and welcome to Stand Up Moto. Just quickly before I get started with my long-term ownership review of the 250SX, I have been asked, has Suzuki sponsored me or paid me to make these videos? Absolutely not. My original review is creeping up on 100,000 views and I've had no correspondence or incentives from Suzuki at all. I paid full retail price for this bike and the accessories. I make these videos for you, the viewer. Now, build quality. This bike is made in India, as are so many nowadays. I think pretty well every major or legacy manufacturer, whatever you want to call it, that produces motorcycles makes bikes in India now, or a lot of the parts. And the build quality of this little bike is excellent. In the last 18 months, or 10,000 odd kilometres, it has had no build quality issues at all. Zero, which is really good. This is in the orange. At the time I bought this bike, they came out in the orange, the yellow. In some countries you had the black. You can still get the black now. We didn't have black at the time, but we do now. And there's also a burgundy colour. And the bike has not varied. In fact, I don't think there's any variations to the bike at all in 18 months. So I think that's probably a good thing. Next thing, fuel economy. The fuel economy on this 250 is just amazing. It hasn't got any better, it hasn't got any worse. The best I've seen is 2.8 litres per 100 kilometres, and in general touring around, I seem to average, when I say my version of touring, that's a lot of high speed stuff too, up around that 100 or 60 odd mile an hour, 110. I seem to average around 3.4 to 3.5 litres per 100 kilometres. That's how many kilometres per litre. I'll put that up on the screen. But yeah, fuel economy wise, good as gold. It's a very, very inexpensive bike to run. What else have I got? Oh, now the gears. I've heard a couple of comments and I've had a little bit of feedback that the gears start to get a little bit stiff on these. I did the first oil change at 1,000 kilometres on this bike. I hadn't had any issues. I put in the recommended oil, and I did notice after a while, neutral was getting just a little bit hard to select. I changed the oil again and I went for a full synthetic and a little bit lighter weight, full synthetic oil. Gearbox now, super, super slick. Not an issue at all. Comfort, as far as the seating is concerned, I've done a lot of long distance, not as in thousands of kilometres in one hit, but a lot of long distance rides on this bike. I have found the seating and the comfort to be brilliant. You can get a lower seat. This standard seat that comes on the bike is fairly high. You can buy a seat from Suzuki. Some will say it is a little bit firm, and yes, it is on the firm side. I prefer it that way myself. I think you could probably recover it in a lighter gel if you wanted to, but comfort-wise, no worries. In the original review that I did, you saw that I had my wife on the back and yeah, she didn't complain about the comfort whatsoever. So comfort-wise, I think it's all good. Cruising speed. Now you'll see all sorts of crazy figures thrown around. I have found the best cruising speed on this bike for reliability, fuel economy, and it doesn't feel like you're hurting the bike, is 100 kilometres an hour. That's a little over 60 mile an hour. I've had it on some stretches for actually about 2 hours straight, quite a few times now, where I'm sitting up around the 110, 115, that's 70 odd mile an hour, and it will do it anywhere between 100 and 120 kilometres an hour, but it really doesn't feel comfortable up there. So 100 kilometres an hour, 60 mile an hour, that seems to be perfect as far as cruising speed is concerned. Low speed work, brilliant. If you're in bottom gear or 1, 2, 3, and you're just climbing around, once again, as we saw in the review, doing a little bit of investigating and, you know, having a tootle around on some back tracks or in the forest or in sand, great. The gearing is just right. I have not altered the gearing at all on the bike. The tyres, now I was a little bit skeptical when I did the review. I had never heard of these tyres before. Believe it or not, this is the original set of tyres still on the bike after 6,000 odd mile or 10,000 odd kilometres. They just don't want to wear out, and they are suited to this bike. On the bitumen, you have to learn to trust them. If you trust them, you have your pressures correct, they are a very, very good tyre. And yeah, new to me, they're out of India. I wasn't aware of the tyres. As far as ease of ownership, oil changes, they're just so simple. I'm a bit of an oil fanatic. I will change my oil way before it's due. On this bike in particular, they're a fairly high revving bike, very short stroke, fairly high revving. Oil in the big picture is cheap. Even a good quality, full synthetic oil, it's not that expensive. Oil filter, nice and simple to get to. Drain the oil, nice and simple to get to. Oil window, you know my thoughts on oil windows. I think every bike should have an oil window, but there you go. I did have to fit a couple of spools or little bobbins on the rear swing arm. I don't know if you can see it in that shot. They're the little red bobbins down there. I bought a pit stand, and I used the pit stand for lifting the back, for lubing the chain. The chain itself is still the original chain, and it hasn't, well, maybe it's stretched a bit, of course. I've had to adjust it, but yeah, no, good quality chain. I was a bit surprised at the chain on the bike also. Air filter, I've done that probably 3 or 4 times. That's not bad, pretty straightforward. It's actually the same air filter, just blowing out with the compressor. Valves, now in the initial review I did, I said they're nut and screw. They're not, they're shim. I've done the clearances about 3 times and they have not varied in that 10,000 kilometres. So yeah, I don't think you've got to do a lot up there. If you do have to do them yourself, you're going to have to do your measurements, then order your shims. Bit of a pain, a lot harder than, well, a lot more of a pain than using the nut and screw. But no, pretty straightforward on the servicing side of things. In fact, easy for the servicing. The little windshield on the front, have had no issues there. As I mentioned also in my review of the bike, that suits me beautifully. It just breaks a wind on my chest and puts my head into free air. I have used this bike a lot when we have visitors that come and visit, or they're here from interstate, or mates come up, and this tends to be the bike of choice that I give them to ride around when we're doing a bit of sightseeing through Harndorf and down, as you know, where we are at the beach. They all seem to ride this bike. Some have said that once they get up into the higher speeds, they're getting a bit of buffeting off of it. And I think it depends on how high you actually sit on the bike. As I said, for me, it's fine. But for some, they have said they get some buffeting. But no, the windshield has been good. Handlebars, the bars that came on this bike did not suit me at all. They tended to angle down a bit, not my riding style. I have put a set of Renthals on here. In fact, the part number for those bars, if you are not happy with the bars on your bike, or if you're thinking of getting one, the part number is on my original review. I'll put the link to my original review in the description of this video. The bars, yeah, I put risers and different bars. It totally changed the bike, as in totally changed the bike from the standing position, seating position. It was a different bike to ride. I would recommend that greatly, especially if you're taller in the body. You don't have to be overall tall. As far as my dislikes, the muffler. Now, it's not a bad looking little muffler on here, and it works well. It keeps the bike nice and quiet. So if you want to tool around in areas and not upset people, or have people breathing down your neck because you shouldn't be there on a bike, it's good from a noise point of view. But it is a real pain, and what I find is my heel hits it all the time, especially when I'm doing that low speed maneuvering type work. If you're just riding on the road or cruising around and you're not standing or doing any of that, it's fine. But yeah, I think the muffler could maybe be up here, just with the single pipe that comes up. Would that get in the road of panniers? I suppose it would, but look, there's ways around that. Yeah, so the muffler, probably one of my dislikes. Visibility of the dashboard, of the instrument panel. When the sun is on it, it is brilliant. And at night, it is brilliant. But in just general riding, like today, now we're at about 35 degrees Celsius at the moment, and the sun is almost straight above us. I find it really hard to read. The speedometer, so your kilometres per hour, is nice and big, admittedly, and nice and clear. But the rest of the instruments around it, I just find it hard to read. I know in some areas they have now this is an LCD. What do they have? A TFT. And it's much clearer, and it has sat-nav and all that sort of thing built into it that Bluetooths to your phone. In Australia, that's the only dash we get, unless they've updated on the new one. I don't think they have. The bike hasn't really varied much apart from the colours on the latest SX, but yeah, not overly happy with the dash. It's perfectly functional, but at this time of day when you're riding, I find it a little bit awkward. Soft front forks. Now this is not really a dislike, but it's pointing something out. It's very firm in the rear, so you can load this bike up. It is great on the rear. The soft is very front. I mention it in the review, so no big jumps, etc. That's the negative side of it. Just slow down a bit, in other words. That's the negative side. The positive side is you can put even very light frame people that aren't used to riding bikes, and we can go down all sorts of dirt tracks, dirt roads, corrugations. It doesn't matter what it is. They absorb everything. I was going to change the oil and put a bit heavier oil in, but I've found you just do not fatigue on this bike. You can ride it for hours and hours, and people that aren't used to riding bikes on rough terrain tend to get sore shoulders a lot, which is just, I just hit the microphone, didn't I? Which tends to happen a lot. Not an issue on this bike. So I have left the front. In fact, I really haven't changed much at all on this bike. The handlebars, the top box, telephone mount, set of bark busters, or any form of guard that goes around. Nothing worse than being out and about. You drop the bike over on its side and you bust a lever. So set of bark busters for me are a must. What else have I got here? Handlebars, risers, the headlights. Now, I mentioned in that review that I did, I love the look of the lights, the stacked lights, LED, of course, and they work fine. There's nothing wrong with them, in and around town and whatnot. But when you go, and if you go on a camping trip, and we'll take this, whether it's on the back of the motorhome or whatever, we'll take this bike. If you get onto roads where you're sitting along at that 100 kilometres an hour, 80, 50 mile an hour, 80 kilometres an hour, they're bright, but they just don't seem to have the depth. So if that's going to be your thing, I would put a little set of driving lights down on those crash bars. I think that would be worth its weight in gold. One either side, of course. In Australia, we have an enormous amount of wildlife when you're on the country roads after dark. So a set of better lights. The lights are okay, super easy to adjust. In fact, I might show you that. Super easy to adjust, but yeah, I would like them maybe a little bit brighter. What is the competition for this bike as far as other brands, etc.? There is none. Well, not here in Australia. In the 250cc bracket, dual purpose, all-round bike that comes in a little over $6,000, and you can convert that to your currency. We are termed AUD if you're putting it into Google. This is the most inexpensive dual purpose trail bike on the market in Oz currently. As I say, there's some good bikes out there. The Honda CRF 300, good little bike. The little BMW is good. I think all of those are made in India. I know the Beamer is. The KTM, what's the KTM? 390. But they're all $3,000 and $4,000 more expensive. That's over half the price of this bike. In addition, this is in a segment all of its own currently in this country, and it pretty well owns it. So what is my summary and conclusion on the little Suzuki 250 VStrom SX? As far as an ownership summary, this bike has been brilliant. It has cost me nothing apart from the initial purchase cost. The handlebars and risers, we spoke about that. Oh, Red, give it a break. He's my Rhode Island Red, my rooster. He likes to get vocal when I'm recording. Apart from that, nothing at all. Filters, oil, no brakes, no tyres. It has been a terrific little bike. It has had many a rider on it. They've all loved riding it. It's inexpensive to run. It is, in the big picture, compared to other bikes that are slightly larger in capacity, it is inexpensive to buy. Would I recommend it? A big definite yes. Hopefully I've got a lot of years left in this bike, and if I do have issues, of course, I'll make a video on those. A couple of reviews that I've got coming up. One of my own bikes, my Triumph Explorer, the big 1200, off-road adventure type bike thing, whatever you want to call it. I've got that review coming up. I'm riding a 650 Suzuki Bergman, and boy, has this bike changed my opinion of scooters. They are terrific. I've had so much fun on this Bergman. So that review will be coming up. And also something a little different. Many moons ago, on an aeroplane flight between Honolulu and San Francisco, I got to spend some one-on-one time with Evel Knievel, and I'm going to tell you just what he told me, that it's had a massive impact on my riding. I'm in my mid-60s now, and this was when I was about 19. So he told... Red, give it a break. Yeah, but what he told me, there are a couple of reviews coming up. But until next time, all the best and cheers.